Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you to all of you for joining us here today. It's a big day for us. We want to welcome you to the launch of the Good Practice Guide on Meaningful NGO Participation. It is our mission in the Alliance, and it is also our obligation as road safety and road victim NGOs to play our part in the second decade of action towards the 2030 goals. And the publication that we are launching today is part of that. It's mobilizing NGOs to engage meaningfully with decision makers. The guide is based on research amongst our Alliance member NGOs, and the guide is very unique because it offers a definition of what meaningful NGO participation is. I'm very proud of our member NGOs and how they hereby are enabling us all to achieving the 2030 targets. So the next hour, we will take you through the findings of the guide and the research. And these findings include 7 elements that we have found constitute meaningful NGO participation in decision making. We will meet 2 of the Alliance members who have practiced meaningful participation, and we will learn from a decision maker what meaningful NGO participation meant for decision making in his country. We'll then have time for questions and wrap up. The guide has been sent to all of you, and could we get the next slide, which has the agenda for today, please? Yeah, there it is. This is the agenda, introduction. This is what you're hearing now. We'll then have Etienne Krug coming in and talking to us about the global perspective. Chika Sakashita will talk about the meaningful participation guide and the survey and the results. We'll have Ratana and we'll have Esteban from our NGOs to talk about their perspectives. And we'll have Duncan Kibogan to talk about the national decision maker perspective. And then we'll have a Q&A. I just need to know if we are ready to move on, or we just need a little bit more time before we move. Okay, so this is just a little bit of timekeeping here or practical things. Could you put the slide up again, please? This is around interpretation and where you can find the guide. Could you put the slide up, please? Thank you. So those of you who will require interpretation, we have interpretation in French and in Spanish. And you go to the bottom line and you'll see a globe that says interpretation. And you click on that and then you change the channel that you need. Could you go to the next slide, please? And this is the slide that talks about where to find the guide. Thank you. So the guide is on our website and you can download it there. We also have sent out an email to all of those who have signed up. And in that is a link to the guide. So that's the launch of it. And we will have a training mainly for NGOs that will be next week. And you can find more information about that on our website. And I just want to flag another event or another training that we also have, which is also next week. And that's a walkthrough of the global plan, so the second decade of action for road safety, where we have Nanshan from WHO joining us for a walkthrough of the main points in the global plan. Could you share with me if we can move on now? I think we are waiting for Etienne Krug to join us. And he will join us very shortly. He's a busy man, so he is in between meetings. So I think till we get Etienne in here, I think we should start with Chika Sakashita, who has been our external consultant, who's been helping with the guide and who's been conducting all the interviews. And Chika, I might interrupt you when Etienne joins, so bear with me on that. So over to you, Chika. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lotte, for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you to the Alliance for having me here. I'll just start sharing my screen. Excuse me. So I'm joining from Sydney, Australia, so good evening from me. I'm so excited to be part of this launch of the very important guide for road safety NGOs on meaningful participation. And as Lotte has outlined, we conducted a survey, a member survey earlier this year to reflect on the past decade and look into the future, the next decade. And I'd like to take this opportunity to give a big thanks to all of you who participated in this survey, because your input has been instrumental to developing this guide. For the next 10 minutes, I'd like to share the results and the key points, specifically in relation to meaningful participation. So we heard from 100 NGOs from 53 countries, and what came out from the survey is that meaningful participation plays a big role in so many ways. So it was highlighted as a key enabler of success during the first decade of action, and a key opportunity for the next decade, the second decade of action that we're entering. And it was also identified as a key capacity development need amongst the NGOs. And we also asked what you believe are the roles and responsibility as an NGO. And it was described as things like influencing the government, holding governments accountable, participating in decision-making, ensuring evidence base, and bringing change. And so this really shows what a vital role NGOs play for our communities. And we also asked directly what you believe meaningful participation entails. And we received a lot of different descriptions of meaningful participation, and those different answers can be found in the guide. But in essence, this is the way it was described. Meaningful participation is about participating in any way that brings policy or legislative changes and other road safety improvements. It's about having access to decision makers and being included in government decision making. It's about adding value and helping government introduce evidence-based policies and interventions that result in death and injury reductions. It's about building public demand and political will and making governments accountable. And these are really insightful descriptions of meaningful participation. We also looked at what the literature says about meaningful participation. And again, there wasn't a really singular agreed definition of meaningful participation. But in essence, it was described as a purposeful activity towards articulated goals. It's about bringing the public into the process, beginning at issue framing and ending at decision making. It's a resourceful process. That means making the most of the participants' expertise and allowing them to participate in efficient and selective ways. It's also receptive and responsive interactions grounded in a respectful relationship. So it's a two-way interactions. So as we NGOs want to enter into the decision-making space, but we also need the governments to allow the NGOs into the decision-making space. And I think what really comes out in these ways of describing meaningful participation is the importance of being aware of the goals you're working towards. So your participation is working towards your goals. And that's what makes it meaningful. And of course, in road safety, the guiding goals are articulated in the Decade of Action and the Sustainable Development Goals. So we want to halve the road deaths and serious injuries by 2030 and contribute to the health and well-being and sustainable cities and communities. And so when we take into all that account, the Global Alliance has come up with a definition of meaningful participation in the field of road safety. So meaningful participation is when NGOs participate in a decision-making space on behalf of the communities they represent, and this "and" is really critical, in a way that leads to actions that result in the reductions and possibly ultimately elimination of deaths, serious injuries, and related psychological suffering from road crashes. So this definition is really, at first glance, it's very packed, but I hope that as we come back to it more and more, that it will become clearer to us what meaningful participation looks like in a more tangible way. And if you are already familiar with meaningful participation, that you will get to see it at a deeper level and notice the different layers of meaningful participation. And I think this meaningful participation is going to be a really important tool for the NGOs into the next decade. So whether it be, so we might use this tool to introduce more 30K speed limits on our urban roads where we find a lot of vulnerable road users. Or it might be to introduce regulations so that vehicles that are sold in your country are labeled with star ratings so that consumers are informed to purchase and buy safer cars. Or it might be, if not already, introducing a comprehensive restraint legislation so that not just the front seat drivers, but all the passengers, front seat and back seat, including children, are appropriately restrained to ensure that when they do get into a crash, that they survive and are not seriously injured. And so in order to assist us in seeing what meaningful participation looks like in a more tangible way, we also provide in the guide case studies. And these case studies are based on key informant interviews with the member NGOs. And I also like to say a big thank you to those who participated in these interviews. So what we did was we identified the success story, the outcome, what change the NGO brought, and then we worked backwards in trying to untangle the ways in which NGOs brought that change. And so we can really analyze what is meaningful participation. And I won't go into these case studies in detail because we have Ratana and Esteban here to share their experiences of meaningful participation, and we will directly hear from them. But when we look at these case studies, and I hope you'll get a chance to read them in the guide, a lot of common elements become apparent in what constitutes meaningful participation. And one of them being using data and evidence. We really need to learn to have the discipline to use data and evidence as much as possible in what we do. We are all aware that we are limited in time, we're limited in funding, we're limited in human capacity. So really the smartest shortcut to making this 50% reduction target is to use interventions that have strong evidence base. And we prioritize those strong evidence-based interventions over the weak ones or the ones that are not yet proven, so that we can get there as quickly as possible. We also need to be able to communicate in a smart way. So we need to communicate in ways that we gain the attention from our governments, from the communities, so that we can implement these interventions with a strong evidence base. And when we use data and evidence, we are able to produce quality outputs in a really consistent manner and build a track record. And that again gains more attention and credibility as an NGO. And I think, from our experiences, we know that timing is so vital. We can be doing all the right things, but it's the timing that really allows us to maximize the effect of those, what we demand. And so when those windows and those windows of opportunities come and go, and sometimes they're unpredictable, so we really need to be prepared. And that's when knowing the data and evidence becomes really handy, and having that track record and being able to communicate in smart ways, and you really seize that opportunity and make the most of it. And being aware of the systems that you work in, the political systems, it may not be perfect yet, but you're aware of the gaps and what is working, and trying to leverage the existing system to bring about the best change possible. And we also need to remember what we're here for. NGOs are here to bring positive impacts for our communities. And this really ties in with the data and evidence. When we do things that are backed up by evidence, we are able to produce the impacts, and we know what we are doing is going to produce positive outcomes for our communities. And when we do all these things, we are really demonstrating our credibility, and the NGO voice becomes credible and as a trusted voice from the government and the communities, and we can become more and more influential in the decision-making space. And I think we're very all experienced in building effective relationships and collaborations. We want to make our voices and the demands bigger and better. And so it's quite a journey of meaningful participation, and it doesn't come without challenges. And there are common challenges that are faced by NGOs, but we also see that there are a lot of NGOs that are still succeeding despite these challenges. And so we also share in the guide example ways of overcoming or addressing these common challenges in order to achieve these positive outcomes. And so as we enter the new decade, we want to think about how can we make our NGO participation more meaningful. And so we will need a little bit of an organizational introspection. And so in this guide, we also provide a checklist so that we can ask ourselves, is my participation complementing and facilitating my government's work to deliver road safety? Is my participation leading to reductions in deaths and serious injuries and psychological suffering? Is my participation adding value to the process or outcome of decision-making for the benefit of the people my NGO represents? And in order to assist in enhancing your meaningful participation, we also provide a checklist in different areas of professionalism and credibility, communication, evidence-based, and outreach. And I really look forward to digging deeper in the training that is coming next week, as Lotte has highlighted. So that is it for me.
Thank you very much, Chika. And there will be time for questions a little bit later, so jot them down and ask them in the chat section there. So according to our Alliance members in the research that we did earlier this year, the success, or one of the contributing factors to success during the first decade of action, was presence of meaningful NGO participation in decision making. And also conversely, NGOs reported that when there was an absence of meaningful NGO participation, this was where there was a hampered progress on the decade of action. And this was really our clue to look into what meaningful participation really looks like and what constitutes it. And we did that because this is a way to support our NGOs in their work. This is also important because it's seen in the context of the second decade of action that has been launched and the global plan that's going to be launched soon. And this guide is particularly pertinent this month as we look towards the launch of the global plan on the 28th of October. And we will have a walkthrough of this global plan next week. So meaningful participation of civil society is an enabler to achieve the 2030 targets. And I would like now us to hear from some of the practical advice from some of our members who are featured in the guide. And this is meant to be a practical advice and also an inspiration to strengthen all our work in advocacy through meaningful NGO participation with our governments, and thereby doing so to make maximum impact towards the 2030 road safety targets. So I'd like to introduce two of our members, Ratana Winter, who's chairperson of AIP Foundation in Thailand. Hi, Ratana.
Yes, nice
and, thank you for joining us. And Esteban Paredes, who is from Fundación Cabat in Ecuador, who is Global Network Coordinator with our member organization there. So I'll turn to you first, Ratana, and just a core element of what constitutes, there's some common elements of what constitutes meaningful participation, and we have highlighted those in the guide. There's 7 themes that we have identified, and each of these themes are showcased or demonstrated by a case study from an NGO. So Ratana, you're one of them from your work in Thailand, and what we highlight here is credibility as an NGO. Why is credibility important for meaningful NGO participation, and how has credibility enabled AIP Foundation in Thailand to engage with your local and with your national government decision makers?
Yes, thank you, Lotta. Thank you, the Alliance, for inviting AIP Foundation to participate in this launch. With credibility, to us, AIP Foundation is very important. We put a lot of work and effort into creating credibility, because we believe that credibility creates trust and confidence in the government to us, and also it creates space for us within the decision-making power space arena. So we try very hard to work in the way that is supportive to the government policy. And as a result of us doing that, present in Thailand, although we are small, an NGO still, and self-supporting NGO, we have been invited to be a member within the subcommittee of the National Road Safety Directing Center, within the pillar of what we call safe road users, which is the pillar that is for us to be active in. And also we have been signing memorandum of understandings with the government to help them with helmet wearing campaign, particularly with child helmet wearing, because that is the area that AIP Foundation has built our credibility on in the region as well. So this is what we believe credibility help us. Lotte, I cannot hear you.
Yes, sorry for that. So what piece of, do you have any advice for some of your fellow NGOs from our group here, and how they strengthen their meaningful participation and in terms of credibility in particular?
Yes, I think the most important thing to focus on with our work is we have to start from us. We have to develop and implement programs that are evidence-based. As Chika has said, we have to refer to evidence, to data, but I think us, again, we also have to create evidence and data so that we have something that is concrete, that can show the government that this is, this is how things should be. And also, I think with an NGO, we, particular small ones, we felt that, I think many of us feel that we don't have a lot of power to do things, but at AIP Foundation, we just charge on, we implement smaller programs, not national level, some are national level, but many of our programs are local based. And I think it's really proved to us that when we concentrate on creating or showing something works based on the evidence that we have shown, it's really powerful and important. And I think this result that we gain from implementing smaller projects can be learned, can be expanded. And I think it does give us a lot of things to talk about within the decision-making group itself. So I think it is very, very important. And in a way, when you create program that is evidence-based, that is it's sort of something that we have, that we can rely on, So it's not directly but indirectly support us in getting even more funding, particularly in or outside. So it's sort of, it goes like that, so it's sort of a feed in each other. So I think my advice is to start with us, create evidence-based programs, start small, and also in line with, what we do should be in line with what the government has been or is trying to do. And I think most of our state members in the world, they have this, SDG to follow. We have targets. So, for example, our work in helmet wearing is exactly in line with the target in Thailand. So when we are in meetings with the government, they really strongly welcome our presence and also our suggestions.
Great.
Yeah.
I think what you're illustrating there is that even though we have highlighted 7 elements of meaningful participation, you have to make sure that each element somehow has to be integrated into what you do. I think it was also a nice bridge to Esteban's work, because one of the features that we have highlighted in the guide around your work is how Kavad leveraged the political system and the opportunities that you found in Ecuador, and you participated meaningfully around that to achieve political change. How did you do that? How did you leverage political system and the opportunities that you saw, Esteban?
Well, first of all, thank you for this space. I am very proud to speak on behalf of Fundación Kavad. Well, since 2008, Fundación Kavad started this journey as a road crashes victim support organization and NGO. We consider there have been 4 main factors that have allowed us to have a better job with the government of Ecuador. These 4 factors are visibility, institutionality, participation, and education. We have achieved visibility through the launch of road safety campaigns with the mobility and traffic authorities of Ecuador and citizens as well. Also providing legal and psychological support to the victims of road traffic crashes and their families. Another important factor to gain visibility before the eyes of political authorities has been to generate interest by gathering relevant information and data. For example, in 2017 was one of the a very tough year with the highest mortality and injury rates due to road traffic crashes, which also drew the attention of the authorities to work in an interinstitutional and collaborative way with our NGO. We consider we have also achieved visibility by being part of international congresses and also by being members of larger organizations such as the Alliance, Save Kids Worldwide, among others. Finally, placing traffic crashes and the lack of public policies on a public discussion through the national media has given us a platform to discuss this topic, since Ecuador is a country with high road accident rates. In second place, there's the institutionality of an NGO, which is very important. What means institutionality? Is to have a legal status, to have an office, to have a work team, to have a directory, to have a website, to have social media, but above all, to work in an organized and proactive way. When you get to have all these characteristics, you start to have public opinion, which give you a space to influence the public policies of a city. You gain also credibility and significant participation. For example, this has allowed us to represent the civil society in the Advisory Council of the Traffic Agency of Ecuador, lobbying at a political level and creating a friendly speech. In the same way, it is very important to make the decision makers understand that an NGO is an ally and not an enemy, that has significant knowledge tools and successful stories to tell that have worked in other countries in order to improve road safety and reduce road traffic crashes that under unacceptable consequences for civil society.
Yeah.
In third place, participation has also been very important, since it shows the work that an NGO has done to the civil society and to potential collaborators from the public and private sector. We have achieved this through creating and being part of campaigns, conversations, dialogues, debates, seminars, and interviews. For example, the road safety conferences, known in Spanish as GISEVI, allowed CABAT to have a voice on transcendental issues such as the reduction of road traffic crashes, but we're also spaces where we count with the participation of national and international experts who share with us their expertise in road crashes prevention and road safety education.
Great. Thank you very much, Esteban. I think actually you touched on my second question, what advice, and you talked about being a stronger organization, having a website of equality, sort of, so I will skip that part. Thank you very much to both of you. Please stay tuned here because I can see a lot of questions are trickling in for you. So please stay with us, Bertana and Esteban, and thank you very much for sharing your stories and your really great work. With us today, we're very fortunate to have Dr. Duncan Kiboga, who is Deputy Director of the National Transport and Safety Authority in Kenya. And Duncan, you have worked closely with a lot of our NGOs in Kenya and in the region. And we are quite keen to hear from your perspective, which is the decision-making view that you're bringing to us. How has NGO involvement made road safety decision-making better in your experience, please?
Thank you, Lotte. Thanks, and thanks for inviting me to make my comments in this particular meeting. Thanks so much. This is a great opportunity for us. Now, NGOs have been part and parcel of our work here in Kenya, and indeed in the region on matters of road safety for quite a while. And the role they play is quite very valuable, and they do, without some of the work of the NGOs, then some activities probably would not have happened in our part of the world, including even the setting up of the agency I work in currently, like NTSA, was whole collaborations between different stakeholders, and the role of the NGOs was quite important in creating a lead agency in the Republic of Kenya, working with other partners, I've said. But definitely, as you said, that NTSA here in Kenya, being the lead agency, that is the National Transport and Safety Authority, being the lead agency on matters road safety, then we do a number of legislation, we do a number of decisions touching on different areas as relates to road safety. So one of it, of course, is that working with NGO creates a lot of legitimacy on the decisions you're making. So that once you begin implementing some of these decisions, then largely speaking, because of the involvement of the NGOs, then the people whom we are going to implement these laws or policies on or otherwise, there will be that level of legitimacy and acceptability of those particular decisions. So that is one very important thing. And then two is that as part and parcel of the requirement of the law, one of the requirements is that we need to involve stakeholders when you're making policy decisions or otherwise, or even legislation. And that is the whole aspect which is in the Constitution, that we have to have what we call public participation. In that case, the NGOs do play a lot in this public participation. And I think the speakers before me quite delved into that particular aspect of participation. not just participation, but meaningful participation, as they said. So that is quite an important area, so much so that you'll realize that some of the decisions made or documents made in draft form, because of the involvement of the NGOs, the final product out of it has probably changed, or if I may use the word, has improved because of the contribution of the particular team we engage in, including the NGOs, who play a very important role. And on top of that, definitely, road safety is something which is, I can say, keeps on changing in terms of the evidence-based decisions. And some of these decisions we make, we get the expertise at times, and most of the time, by engaging other stakeholders. And in this case, I'm talking about the NGOs. Largely speaking, is because the role the NGOs have played out there, they have network across the region, probably even across the world, including the alliance. And what happens in that case then is that with that network, you are able to get a pool, we are able to get a raft of expertise in what you're going to work on. And that's very important. And as NGOs, that your role becomes quite critical. Talking about networking is also an area as governments we also require, not just working for the government where you've been employed to work, but that networking between ourselves as government and other governments out there and other experts out there and other partners out there is a role we've always seen the NGOs playing a role in terms of sort of connecting, networking, creating a web between ourselves and the rest of the world, so to speak. And in that brings a lot of issues in terms of knowledge to government, to many other stakeholders, brings different perception of issues, how to approach it, bring the best practice out there to be brought on board here. And that is quite important. Then the other important part is we make these decisions as government. At times, we are tied up to what I can describe as procedural issues and bureaucracies. I'll give an example, is that when you want to make a law through parliament, at times it takes a longer route in terms of having to discuss as government, then finally going to probably the cabinet minister, then subsequently going to parliament for discussion. But working with NGOs, some of this can be expedited in terms of having some of these direct laws being done. And I think like the change of the traffic law, which happened not so long ago, was guided and spearheaded by NGOs. And if you compare, if you were to do it using the formal processes, then definitely it would have taken a bit of time. But the role of the NGOs is that they can easily bypass some of those should I use the word is red tape and have some of those policies done. Then definitely the NGOs, as I said before, and I think it was mentioned, is that we play different roles. Some, of course, implement even some of the decisions we do make. So some are implementing some of those things right from at advocacy level and at different areas. So largely speaking, that is what it is in terms of that NGO involvement on matters road safety decision making is quite important. And definitely from my experience is that it has made better decisions than before. And this is a partnership all governments should adopt in terms of encouraging that relationship with NGOs. Thank you.
Very powerful. Thank you very much. I think some good advice here and definitely some encouragement for meaningful participation to all of you. Duncan, any advice or tips for NGOs who are trying or seeking to be more effective in their engagement with the decision makers?
Yes, Lotte, I think, yes, that is a very important question. I know different NGOs at different levels. Some are fairly, big, others are fairly small with different resources and all that. My advice on NGOs, largely speaking, working in government is that as much as possible, as you do your activities, government, you should also try as much as possible to understand the subject matter you are dealing with. That is fair level of knowledge. I am not saying that you have to be an expert in it, but it's also important. Government officials love engaging, or rather appreciate engaging on NGOs or engaging in someone who knows the subject matter to some extent, so that there's some fair level of engagement. Then number two is that you need to appreciate as an NGO, the government processes and procedures of different issues, right from funding, right from how they make laws, how they make policies, so that you can engage meaningfully. The point here is that you should be in a position to largely get to know how procedures are done in your government or in your country for that matter. So that as NGO, you'll not be, so to speak, cropping in the dark. Now, the other thing I'd also advise is the issue of having a coalition, or rather, an alliance, so to speak, in your country, so that I know you'll probably be dealing different areas as in your NGO work on matters of road safety, but nevertheless, it's important to put your heads together and have some kind of a coalition, alliance, or consortium, whichever name you want, a group, whichever name you want. Then definitely one thing which has come out, and this really speaks very well if you speak to governments, is the whole aspect of using data and evidence in your decisions or in your work. Without having to do that, then there's a likelihood that your message which you want to pass on may hit a brick wall, or at least or may be slowed. Then definitely is on that aspect I talked before around being knowledgeable to some extent, is that we do have a fair number of documents which are out there, which governments have committed to do, have committed to implement, have signed. Some are global, some are regional, some are even national. And so some of the documents, of course, it's important to get to know them, so that as you engage a government official like myself, is that you are not engaging them from out of the blue, so to speak, but you are engaging them from some of the documentation, some of the commitments they've said that they are going to do to their citizens, including, for example, the National Road Safety Action Plans, which many counties probably have put in place, including their laws and legislations and constitutions, which probably give rights to the citizens, right to safety, right to health, environment, and roads for that matter. In different countries, I'm sure such laws are there, which gives them power, or rather gives the citizens. So you can begin from that discussion. Some policy documents, transport policy documents, road safety policy documents which are out there. And I said, including regional and UN and global declarations, which our governments, most governments for that matter, are committed to work around. And probably mentioned a few, including the Stockholm declarations, the UN Decade of Actions, among others. I am not mentioning all of them. So it's quite important for government, for NGOs to work towards getting to understand, basically to have a base of matters road safety to some extent, so that as you engage, you're engaging from a point of view. With such kind of engagement, then one would see that there is a meaningful engagement with yourself. Others, including that working together with government at all times. At times, NGOs may not be having resources per se or money to support programs, but participating in government procedures where it's open to them. For example, during development of some documents or plans, or even launching of an event for that matter. And from a part of the world is that we encourage that, and we are actually required to ensure that when you're coming up with a plan or a document or even legislation, then you should play a role so that your efforts and your inputs get into it. And I think that is quite important. Then, of course, sharing your expertise. And the other thing is, I would say, is that in some situations, I think it's important that you create some champions on matters road safety in your part of the world. In that case, then probably, so that I finish, is the issue of running some projects, implement some small projects, or rather what I can describe as demonstration projects, which have been found to government thereafter will can adopt or will see the importance of it. We've seen some small projects like helping children to cross the road have been quite influenced on how procedures are done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Duncan. I think we are sort of tying a lot of the things that we have been talking about here together, and it's really good to hear from you. We have a time for questions in a little while, and before we get to that, I would like to invite Joeichen to join us. Joeichen is the Director of Social Determinants of Health for WHO. Joeichen, please provide a few reflections on meaningful NGO participation, please.
Thanks so much, Lotte, and hi to all my NGO friends. It's so good to see you here meeting once more. And when Lotte mentioned that this guide was going to be launched, I definitely wanted to be there and participate in this event. And I'm sorry I had you wait a little bit at the beginning. I was double booked and tried to juggle 2 calendars, but the other meeting finished too early. So anyway, here I am. And I'm very happy to be there because, first of all, the launch of this guide is another testimony of the very vibrant community you have become. And it's so exciting to see year after year the movement grow, the NGOs becoming bigger in numbers as well as in strength and in organization. So this is fantastic. And yes, meaningful NGO participation is going to be crucial more than ever as we start off the new decade. As you probably know, on the 28th of October, we will launch the new plan of action for this decade. And NGOs, all types of NGOs, those representing victims, youth NGOs, all other NGOs are really mentioned there as one of the key players in the road safety field. And I have no doubt that if we are to achieve the target of a 50% reduction in mortality and in injuries from road traffic crashes, it will only happen thanks to meaningful NGO engagement. As we all know, governments have plenty of priorities, all kinds of pressures, all kinds of groups asking them to do things. And if we do not have our own community putting gentle pressure as well as advising and supporting governments in implementation, it's not going to happen. So I'm delighted this guide is coming out. I want to congratulate all of you who worked on it and encourage all others to have a good look at it. It's a great document that will provide good guidance for all in how to engage meaningfully with NGOs. So thanks for doing this. Thanks for having me here. Again, keep going with this fantastic work you're doing. I just want to encourage all of you because I know it's not easy. Many of you are all alone in your countries trying to wave the road safety flag, push governments to do more, and nobody's listening sometimes. But keep going. It's only with perseverance and repeating over and over and over the message, and I've been doing this for many years too, that we will get somewhere. So thanks, Lotte. Hi to all of you, and have a great discussion. And hopefully, I can count on all of you to organize events on the 28th of October or around that time and encourage your city leaders, national leaders to do the same.
Thank you very much, Joeichen, and a lot of encouragement here for meaningful NGO participation and a lot of guidance from both Esteban and Ratana and also Duncan on how you do it. And I think this is really what we wanted to get out of this session. I don't know if you are able to stay with us, Joeichen, or we...
A few more minutes.
Okay, so if any of you have a question for Joeichen, please, this is now. I can see that we have a few questions coming in, and there was one for you. Let me just find it here. For you, Ratana, which says, how did you overcome different challenging interests in your governmental institution staff? What are the tricks to get their backing?
Since Athens has only a few minutes, should we ask to see if there's any question for Athens, and then I can answer?
Yeah. Do you have any advice here? How do you get institution backing, Joeichen?
I think what many of you are doing is the right thing. We need to, on one hand, I think NGOs have the freeness of speech that not all of us have. So, you know, be very blunt and vocal. Use the statistics, but also the emotional component that comes with the immense suffering that follows road traffic crashes, and persevere. It can take many interactions before things start moving, but it's not a reason to abandon. We are fighting for a just cause, for an important cause, and an issue for which there are very concrete and relatively simple solutions, contrary to many other issues. So there's no reason not to do it, and they're cost effective. So yeah.
Thank you, Joeichen. Ratana, do you have anything you want to add?
Actually, I'd like to hear a little bit from the person who asked question, what she meant by different challenging interests of your government institution staff. Can we
let's
do that or not?
We are not able to bring anyone in, so if you're unclear, maybe we can move on.
Sure. That's okay. Yes, that's fine. Yes. I think what we have been doing in Thailand, as I said, we develop and implement our program that is really based on the event. For example, our helmet program. I mean, they may not have, the government may say, why are you doing that in that part of the province? I mean, you know, people are very cooperative and stuff. And no, but the thing is that before we start our program, we always have to collect data, go out there and see if there's a, for example, how high is helmet wearing rate in that particular area or particular school environment, and then we implement our program, and then we do the monitoring of helmet wearing, and then at the end we do helmet wearing observation. And for us, I mean, this is I use AIP Foundation as a catalyst here. You know, we have this very robust helmet wearing observation methodology that we developed from the assistance from CDC. So it has been used and done, and it's proven to be reliable and good tool to use. So that's how we when we go and see present our program to the government, I mean, what can they say? I mean, we have covered our base. And also, I think when you're talking about different interests from government staff, perhaps instead of, I would assume in road safety, instead of doing this, why don't we do that, right? I mean, that is probably the issue here. So that's why I think we rely on whatever, you know, the real evidence that we show. Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Duncan. There's a question I'd like to ask you, and it is, how do you approach uninterested governments?
How do you encourage uninterested governments? I think the question, yes, governments usually would be very responsive on matters which touches on their citizens. So I guess one of the reasons why probably that is not happening is that the particular person, the NGO, should approach it differently. And I think we talked about having to use data to pass the information. Two is that, and I think Etienne talked about this, is that bringing another aspect to it, like emotions to it, amongst others. So there's always a way of trying to work around it. And of course, the persistence on the subject matter. What I mean by persistent is that it will not be a one-off engagement for that matter. It will take a bit of time. So those are some of the areas we're talking about, so that you encourage government to listen to yourselves, and further you allow you to engage them meaningfully on the matters. But as I said, there's no right and wrong answer, and it depends on a number of areas. You can become more, you can publish, you even bring research papers on the subject matter, involve other NGOs as well, not just yourself, because probably the person you're dealing with is as probably would listen better from if they heard from another person. So there are all ways of number of ways of approach the same. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And there's just an ask for an elaboration, and we only got 1 minute for it. So it is, what did you mean by accelerate procedures in drafting law? You said how NGOs could work on that. How can that accelerate procedures in drafting a law? Do you have a specific example of that?
Yes, I do. The point here is, I'll give an example in Kenya, for example, is that if you want to change a law, or if the government wants to change a law, or for example, myself in NTSA would want to change a law, say reduction of speed, or whichever, what in the Traffic Act, there is a process to that. The process is that we discuss it internally, then we write to the mother ministry where we are under, then subsequently it goes to the Office of the Attorney General, where there'll be a number of deliberations on that. Then thereafter, then it's taken to Parliament for discussion. So if you can see from that alone, and by the way, I've just cut off even some of the steps, there are about 4 or 5 steps. But working with NGOs would have some of those accelerated. For example, one of the NGOs here, South Kenyan team, they teamed themselves up with a number of 4 or 5 others, and they went to see a parliamentarian who brought a private member's bill in Parliament. And within a shorter period of time, then that piece of legislation was adjusted or rather amended. So that is exactly, so it takes shorter period of time in some of these areas, rather than following. At times, government can be bureaucratic, can have red tape, can have step by step, and that is what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think maybe we can just make it for one more question, maybe for Esteban. Accountability. How do you hold governments to account? In particular in countries where where the high level of road fatalities, high numbers of road fatalities. Esteban, any comments to that?
Well, I think it's very important to start making a thorough research about the problem you want to make visible. It's important to highlight the technical work behind the proposal you have with your governance. Make them see how they can benefit from talking about this issue and how it's linked to his or her functions. Finally, I think it's very important to provide the authority with information and advice that could be used by them to work with the media. Here in Ecuador, it's very common that the media approach to the decision makers to see how accountable they are, how they are working with their functions. So it's very important to work closely with them, but also make them aware of the benefit they are going to gain whilst they work with the citizens, whilst they work to improve the road safety and reduce the road traffic crashes in the country.
Thank you very much. It's time to wrap up. It's 3 o'clock here where I am, and we promised to keep it to an hour. Thank you very much to you, Esteban, to Ratana. Thank you very much to our 2 members. Duncan from Kenya, thank you very much for bringing in a very important perspective. And I think it also opens up for us that it is important to bring in decision makers on ideas. Chika, thank you very much for your work with our NGOs, bringing all these amazing findings forward, which is very useful. And obviously, Joeichen, thank you very much for joining us and giving us a pep talk about how important we are here. I just want to let you know that you can download the guide on our website. The link has also been sent to you. It's coming in various forms. Please read it. Also, those of you who are featured there, please read through it and use this and spread the word about it. We do have a training on the guide and how to use it, and which will probably address some of the issues that have already been talked about here. So there's a lot of those questions that we didn't manage to address today. there's a possibility and an option to address them in the training, which is next week. And then we also have this global plan walkthrough. It's an opportunity to learn about the global plan, which is going to be released on the 28th of October. So put down important dates: 5th for the training, 6th for the global plan walkthrough, and attend those trainings and webinars. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. It's been amazing to have you, and we're very excited about it's your work. It's you who have provided this information. It's reflecting what the important work that you do on the ground. Thank you very much for that, and have a very good day. Thank you.